Hello everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to review what is a direct and indirect object. So let's begin. So before we begin to talk about direct and indirect objects, we have to really understand how is the structure of a sentence. So let's take a look at this sentence. Pedro y María hablan sobre el viaje a Peru. Pedro and Maria talk about their trip to Peru. So Pedro and Maria, they are my subject in this sentence. Hablan is the verb, and sobre el viaje a Peru is the object. So every sentence has this structure: subject, verb, object. So now we're going to take a look at the types of objects. So every sentence has a direct object and an indirect object. So let's take a look at this sentence. Tú tienes el pasaporte para ir a Chile. You have the passport to go to Chile. So tú is my subject, tienes is my verb, and el pasaporte is my direct object. The direct object is always located right next to the verb, and it answers the questions what, qué, or who, quién. Let's take a look at the next sentence. Veo a la gente de inmigración. The equivalent in English will be I can see the immigration officer. So in this case, the subject is yo, the verb is veo, and my direct object is going to be el agente, which is a person. And the reason I have that a there is because I need the a personal. So the equivalent in English, I is my subject, can see is my verb, and the immigration officer is my direct object. Remember that the direct object answers to the questions of what, in the previous case, the passport, or who, in this case, who do I see? The immigration officer. So let's take a look at another sentence. Rosa da el pasaporte a su madre. Rosa is my subject, da my verb. El pasaporte is going to be my direct object, and su madre is going to be the indirect object because is receiving the passport. So in English, Rosa gives the passport to her mother. Again, Rosa is my subject, gives is my verb, the passport is my direct object, and her mother is the indirect object. So notice that because her mother is a person, we need to have the personal a. So now that we know what a direct object and indirect object is, let's take a look at object pronouns. So object pronouns are used to replace these direct and indirect objects. So in English, it's pretty simple because they are the same for both. Me, you, him, her, it, us, and them. But for Spanish, it becomes a little bit more tricky. So in the form of yo and tú, they are the same, me and te. In the form of él, ella, they change a little bit. Direct, lo and la. Indirect, le. Nosotros goes back the same, nos and nos. But for them, changes again, los and las. And indirect object, it will be les. So looking back at our structure of a sentence, subject, verb, object. So option A is a subject, the verb, and a direct object. Rosa tiene el pasaporte. And if I want to replace, then it would be sí, ella lo tiene. So notice that when the verb is conjugated, the direct object goes before the verb. Now let's take a look at this other sentence. Vamos a hacer las maletas ahora? No, no vamos a hacerlas. So, las maletas is my direct object, and las is my pronoun. When the verb is in the infinitive, it goes right after the verb and becomes one word. So let's take a look at another type of sentence. And in this one, we're going to introduce an indirect object. So notice that the direct object always goes next to the verb, and the indirect object always goes next to the direct object. So if I look at the sentence, Rosa da el pasaporte a su madre. So el pasaporte is my direct object, and su madre is my indirect object. So as a result, I need to have the le before the verb. In English, it will be the equivalent of Rosa gives the passport to her mother. So let's take a look at another sentence. Voy a vender mi carro a los chicos. So mi carro is the direct object. Los chicos are my indirect object, and I need to have the a personal because they represent people. So again, I need to have a les there, and I can add it right next to the verb because I have a group of people who are receiving the action of getting the car. In English, is the same as I'm going to sell my car to the students. Okay, so remember, every sentence needs to be in the structure subject, verb, object. I can have a sentence with subject, verb, and direct object, which goes right next to the verb. Or I can have another type, which is subject, verb, direct object, and indirect object. And the indirect object always goes next to the direct object. And that's it for today.